Have you ever walked away from an argument feeling like you lost, even though your reasoning wasn't flawed at all? The problem isn't that you're not intelligent, it's that you're fighting with emotion, while the wise fight with questions. This video, grounded in the spirit of Stoicism, will give you 5 questions from the Socratic Method that can strip bare any argument, including the distorted beliefs hidden inside you. If you're brave enough to face the truth, watch until the end. How do you know that's true? It sounds gentle, but it's a knife that cuts straight into the heart of any belief. Most of us live by borrowed truths. What people say, what our parents taught, what society programmed into us, what social media stuffs into our minds. Very rarely do we stop and ask ourselves, hold on, how do I know this is true? That question is like turning on a light in a dark room. It's not to humiliate the other person, but to expose whether that belief stands on solid rock or is just a castle of sand. When you ask, how do you know that's true? You are forcing the other person to turn back and look at the source of their belief. Very often, that root is nothing more than, I heard so. Everyone says so. I feel like it's true. But Stoic philosophy teaches us, emotions are not evidence, and the majority is not a compass for truth. Truth does not care who you are, what class you belong to, or how much you have suffered. It simply is. And this question is the doorway that leads you there. The scary thing is, when people cannot prove the root of their belief, they have 2 choices. Admit, it turns out this belief of mine is quite fragile. Defend, get angry, change the subject, launch personal attacks. The way they react reveals the level of maturity in their mind. Someone who can endure the feeling of, I might be wrong, is someone truly on the path to becoming stronger. Those who cling to their beliefs without daring to re-examine them are not protecting truth. They are only protecting their ego. Advanced variation. What would have to be true for what you're saying to become false? This is a highly subtle question. It forces the other person to find the conditions that would destroy their own argument. For example, someone says, anyone who isn't successful is just lazy. For this statement to be wrong, it's enough that some people are very hardworking but are crushed by illness, sudden events, or heavy circumstances. There are systems so unjust that individual effort alone is not enough to break through. Just one such case is enough to make that absolute assertion collapse, and that person is forced to admit that their argument is not the truth. It is only a narrow slice of reality. In your role as a creator of motivational, philosophy-based content, you can use these questions not to destroy others, but to help your viewers see themselves more clearly. When they dare to ask, how do I know I'm useless? How do I know for sure that I will fail? What would have to be true for the belief, I'm not worthy, to become false? They begin to see so many feelings of inferiority, limitation, and fear are not standing on truth, but on old stories that have never been questioned. Socrates used questions to free the mind. Stoicism uses reason to free the soul from illusion. And you, with just one small question, how do you know that's true, can be the one who awakens a whole mind that has been sleeping inside fake truths. If the first question, how do you know that's true, is like a strike that cuts across the surface of a belief, then the second question, what are you assuming, is the blow that digs down into the foundation. Once the surface is cracked, this is when we look beneath it to see whether it stands on solid rock, or just soft mud made of things that seem true but aren't. Every argument, no matter how sharp it sounds, stands on invisible assumptions, like a house that looks solid from the outside, yet no one bothers to look at the foundation. The question, what are you assuming, forces the other person and ourselves to stop, bend down, and really look at that base. Because once the foundation is revealed to be wrong, the entire structure of the argument above it automatically loses its value. Take this statement, everyone should go to university. At first glance, it sounds like right, safe, and responsible advice. But what lies beneath it? It assumes that everyone wants the same kind of life. Everyone fits into the same type of education system. There is only one proper path: school, degree, stable job. Stoic philosophy is not opposed to going to university, but it is opposed to lazy thinking. When you ask, what are you assuming when you say everyone should go to university? You are gently pulling people out of a vague illusion back into concrete reality. There are people who learn a trade, create art, do business, travel, experience life, and live a significant life without any diploma hanging on their wall. This question is powerful because it touches a very uncomfortable truth. So many things we believe are right are actually just lifestyle models chosen by the majority, not universal truths. Looking more broadly, the same is true in our emotional life. When you say, nobody really cares about me, you are assuming that everyone must show care in the exact way you expect. If people are silent, it means they don't love you. But if instead, you dare to ask yourself, what am I assuming when I think this way? You will realize that so much sadness, hurt, pride, and emotional pain is built upon assumptions that have never been tested. And as Stoicism reminds us, it is not the world that hurts us, but the way we interpret the world. In your role as a creator of motivational, philosophy-based content, you can turn this question into a mirror. Not a mirror for the outer appearance, but a mirror that reveals the structure of your audience's thinking. Every time they make an absolute claim, everyone, always, never, guide them back to, in that statement, what are you assuming about yourself, about others, and about life? When assumptions are exposed, the argument loses its foundation. But the most beautiful part is this. At that very moment, the opportunity to build a new foundation, more straightforward, more compassionate, appears. And that is the moment when your viewers not only understand the philosophy better, but actually begin to live differently. If the second question, what are you assuming, helps us peel away the invisible foundation of an argument, then the third question takes us one step deeper into a place very few dare to touch. Our willingness to change ourselves. What evidence would make you change your mind? This question sounds gentle, but in truth, it's a clear dividing line between someone who knows how to think and someone who only believes blindly. When you ask it, you're not attacking the content of the argument. You're examining the quality of the mind holding that argument. If the other person answers, nothing can change me, then the conversation is over. At that point, there is no reason, no desire to seek truth, only an ego building a defensive wall. Stoicism teaches us, a wise mind is not a mind that is always right, but one that is willing to adjust when it realizes it is wrong. The one who says, I never change, may look strong, but in reality, they are so fragile that they cannot bear the thought that they might be mistaken. The question, what evidence would make you change your mind, forces that person to define in advance. What thing, what data, what experience, what proof would be strong enough to make them stop and re-examine their belief? Or is their whole belief system nothing more than a self-defense fortress built only to protect the ego? In heated debates, you'll see this very clearly. The less reason there is, the louder people get. They don't listen, they don't weigh anything. They just wait for their turn to speak. In that space, you cannot persuade because they never intended to let truth in. Stoic philosophy is efficient. Don't waste your energy arguing with a mind that has already locked its doors. But the real power of this question is not to expose others. It is to shine a light back on yourself. When you believe, I don't deserve success, I'm the kind of person no one could ever love, my life is definitely going to stay like this forever. Try asking yourself, what evidence would make me change that belief? If the answer inside is, there is no evidence at all, that's just how I am. At that moment, you finally see the one who's been believing blindly is not anyone else, it's you. And the moment you realize that, a new door opens. You can start looking for different kinds of evidence, small experiences, little steps forward, the times you were stronger than you thought, to rewrite the story you tell about yourself slowly. For a YouTube channel that spreads motivation through philosophy, this question is a soft but razor-sharp weapon. It doesn't force viewers to believe you, it invites them to question themselves. And when someone dares to honestly answer the question, what would make me change? That is a sign they are ready to grow. If the question, what evidence would make you change your mind, is a test of whether you dare to face yourself, then the fourth question takes an even harder step. Stepping outside yourself. When the inner world has become a little less stubborn, this is the moment you're invited to cross over to the other side of the battlefield and ask, what would someone who disagrees with you say? This question sounds simple, but it is actually one of the strictest tests of intelligence and spiritual maturity, because to answer it honestly, you are forced to step out of your ego, temporarily put down the need to be right, and sincerely try to see the world from another person's point of view. In arguments, we usually do the opposite. We barely understand the other person's position, we exaggerate their weak points, we downplay anything that makes sense in what they're saying, and then we confidently declare they're completely wrong. But Stoic philosophy does not allow that kind of laziness. Stoicism demands fairness, and first of all, fairness in how we perceive things. When you ask yourself, if I were the one opposing me, what would I say? You are forcing yourself to express the opposing viewpoint honestly, clearly, and respectfully. Acknowledge the strengths and valid points in their position. See the context, fears, experiences, and values, standing behind the way they think. And if you cannot do that, if you can't accurately describe the opposing view without distorting it, mocking it, or turning it into a joke, then the truth is elementary. You do not yet understand the issue. This question is like a doorway opening into empathy. When you are calm enough to stand on the other side, you may realize the other person is not a monster, not an idiot, but a human being with their own history, wounds, fears, and context. They are not simply opposed to you. They are just looking from a different angle. Intellectually, this is an exercise in multidimensional thinking. A person of depth is not the one who speaks so sharply that they crush their opponent, but the one who can represent the opponent's view so accurately that the opponent has to nod and say, yes, that's exactly what I meant. Only from there can a real conversation begin. Emotionally, this question helps break rigidity. We cling less to the story, I'm right, you're wrong, and begin to shift toward the question, what is true no matter who it comes from? This is the spirit of humility that Stoicism always emphasizes. For a YouTube channel that spreads motivation through philosophy, you can turn the question, what would someone who disagrees with you say, into an invitation for viewers to grow beyond their ego. Not just to argue better, but to live more deeply, to know how to listen, how to put themselves in someone else's position, and to dare to admit that truth is often far more complex than the neat little story the ego wants to believe. If the fourth question, what would someone who disagrees with you say, forces you to step out of your ego and stand on the other side, then the fifth question is the final strike. It doesn't just ask about you or them, it asks about the entire world that this belief will create. That's when you ask, what would happen if everyone thought like you? This is the finishing blow, not because it shuts people up, but because it pushes an argument to its final logical limit. Many statements sound clever, sharp, and full of reason, as long as they stay within the boundaries of the individual. I just need to live for myself first. In this society, the strong deserve to win, and the weak deserve to lose. Men are not allowed to be weak. People are poor because they don't try hard enough. But when you gently ask, if everyone thought that way, what would happen? The bigger picture begins to appear, and it's usually very dark. If everyone only thought of themselves and didn't care about anyone else, what would the world look like? No one would stop to help a stranger in trouble. No one would listen to anyone's pain. There would be no trust and no acts of unconditional kindness. Such a society might be realistic, but it would definitely not be a place we'd want to live in. At that point, what was called a wise life philosophy reveals another face: selfishness disguised as principle. Stoicism always cares about universality. What is good, not just for me, but for human beings in general. The question, what would happen if everyone thought like you, is the test. Can your belief become a principle for collective living, or is it just a personal defense mechanism painted over with philosophical color? If it cannot be applied to everyone, if using it widely would destroy the community, then it is not the truth. It is only a way of legitimizing hurt, fear, and ego. You can use this question in your content like a magnifying mirror. When a character in your story says, "I don't need anyone to understand me, I just need to live true to myself," invite your audience to imagine, if everyone in your family thought that way, what would happen? If your parents, your children, the person you love, all chose to live only for themselves? From there, viewers don't just hear philosophy, they directly feel the consequences of beliefs that sound cool, but quietly destroy every connection. At its core, the fifth question does not end a debate, but ends an illusion. The illusion that we can live rightly while seeing only ourselves and not others. It invites the viewer to step from me to us, from the short-term benefit of the self to the long-term picture of life and community. And it is precisely in that moment that motivation stops being a slogan and becomes a subtle responsibility. To live in such a way that if your belief were multiplied across the world, it would make this place kinder, not more cruel.